On a sweltering July 20, 1944, Adolf Hitler's Wolf Lair headquarters buzzed with tension. Officers and stenographers huddled around a vast map as the Führer berated a general for suggesting retreat. Into this charged atmosphere stepped Colonel Klaus von Stauffenberg, a tall, scarred man clutching a bulky briefcase. Positioning himself near Hitler, he slid the briefcase under the table before excusing himself for an urgent Berlin call. Colonel Heinz Brandt took Stauffenberg's spot, irritated by the briefcase crowding his feet. Momentarily distracted by a sneeze, he left it untouched. Minutes later, a massive explosion shattered the Wolf's Lair, the bomb's detonation signaling the start of Operation Valkyrie, a daring plot to dismantle the Nazi regime from within. Resistance movements across occupied Europe had long fought Nazi oppression, and this was their boldest move yet. By 1944, World War II had turned decisively against Germany. Soviet forces neared the Reich's borders, and the Allies had landed in Normandy. A coalition of German nationalists, conservatives, social democrats, and liberals united to save their nation. They devised Operation Valkyrie, reproposing an emergency protocol to seize the Wehrmacht and eliminate Nazi leaders. Targeting Hitler's inner circle, Hermann Göring, Joseph Goebbels, and Heinrich Himmler, the plotters aimed to decapitate the regime. Some, like Prussian Finance Minister Johannes Popitz, even approached Himmler, offering support if he betrayed Hitler for peace. These failed overtures alerted the SS to the conspiracy. Stauffenberg rushed to Berlin post-explosion to lead the coup, ordering Friedrich Fromm to launch operations. Major Otto Ernst Remer was tasked with encircling the propaganda ministry to arrest Goebbels. The conspirators spread a narrative that Nazis had killed Hitler, positioning themselves as the Reich's saviors. At Göring's home, they found his corpse, suggesting a rival faction's counter-coup. Himmler, forewarned, deployed the SS strategically. Launching Operation Storm, he used the Gestapo to monitor plotters, seized Berlin's radio stations, and branded them enemies. As Himmler's grip tightened, the coup unraveled. SS officers occupied key buildings and Remer defected, surrounding the conspirators' headquarters. General Fromm, desperate to save himself, ordered the arrest and execution of his allies to prove Nazi loyalty. Within 6 hours, the coup collapsed. Though Hitler was dead, Himmler consolidated power, ushering in an SS reign of terror. His regime intensified Aryan purity policies, diverting resources to eradicate undesirables and expand eugenics programs, unleashing horrors across occupied Europe. Himmler's fanatical rule could not stem the war's tide. By early 1945, the Allies had liberated much of France and Belgium, while Soviets dominated Eastern Europe. His token peace offers were rejected, and as Germany's collapse loomed, Himmler planned an underground war. Resources fueled werewolf groups, terrorist cells blending into civilian populations to attack occupiers. Even after Berlin's fall and Germany's surrender, SS fanaticism endured, with Nazi guerrillas terrorizing Central Europe. The Alps became a hub for Nazi terrorism, targeting left-wing politicians, Jews, and immigrants. Decades passed before the threat subsided. Meanwhile, the explosion's aftermath saw Stauffenberg's deputy alert Berlin conspirators to proceed. General Friedrich Olbricht acted swiftly, knowing time was critical. Within 2 hours, Goebbels and Göring were detained, and Himmler, closely monitored, was neutralized. By day's end, Nazis lost Berlin and the Wehrmacht. A shadow government, forged from the resistance's diverse ranks, emerged. Field Marshal Erwin von Witzleben, the highest-ranking military plotter, assumed Wehrmacht command across occupied Europe, establishing its supremacy over the Nazi Party. Ludwig Beck, titled Imperial Regent, led the New Germany, a coalition of conservative and nationalist figures united against Hitler and the war. Beck, once a Hitler supporter, now saw him as a warmonger doing Germany. Many in the regime believed the war was just, seeking Germany's restoration as a European power. They aimed for peace with the Western Allies to focus on the Soviets, but Germany's territorial demands, Austria, Sudetenland, parts of Poland, and Alsace-Lorraine, clashed with Allied insistence on unconditional surrender. Beck tasked Field Marshal Gunther von Kluge with negotiating an armistice in France, but talks stalled. The Allies viewed the new government's aims as Nazi-like. Poland's government in exile rejected territorial claims, and Churchill dismissed the regime, stating, "The highest figures in the German Reich are killing one another, while the avenging armies of the Allies close in on the doomed and ever-shrinking circle of their power." Soviet peace talks also failed, as Stalin endorsed unconditional surrender. Post-Normandy, Allied advances intensified, though the Wehrmacht delayed Soviets in Poland and held the Rhineland for months. Germany's collapse was imminent, leading to Allied and Soviet occupation. Reconstruction was arduous. Many Germans saw Beck's government as traitorous, fueling a stab-in-the-back myth. A neo-Nazi movement revered Hitler as a martyr, hampering democracy's growth. The Marshall Plan brought prosperity, but the 1973 oil crisis spurred right-wing extremism. Despite the coup's success, peace remained elusive. Negotiations with allies and Soviets faltered. Chancellor Karl Friedrich Goerdeler and Foreign Minister Ulrich von Hassel recognized bold steps were needed, favoring the Western allies. Goerdeler authorized von Hassel, a seasoned Versailles diplomat, to negotiate broadly. But Roosevelt and Churchill demanded unconditional surrender. Germany found sympathy among Allied conservative nationalists. George Bell, Anglican Bishop of Chichester, and Alan Dulles, a senior U.S. Office of Strategic Services official, lobbied for the new government's image. Goerdeler repealed the Nuremberg laws, declaring an end to the inhumane, deeply shameful persecution of Jews. Despite protests, Germany pledged to follow the Atlantic Charter, brutally suppressing Nazi-led revolts. To shed its Nazi past, the government debated a monarchy. After disputes, they chose Prince Louis Ferdinand of Prussia, Wilhelm U's grandson, for a British-style constitutional monarchy. Unlike his Nazi-tied father, Louis Ferdinand had minimal Nazi links and was a friend of Roosevelt. Though allies insisted on unconditional surrender, perceptions shifted. At the February 1945 Yalta Conference, Churchill grew wary of Soviet ambitions in Eastern Europe, opening a diplomatic window. Von Hassel's representative told Churchill Germany would surrender in the West, arguing a strong Germany could counter Bolshevism. Exploiting distrust between Western allies and Soviets, Germany paved the way for surrender. The April 1945 Reims surrender was hailed as unconditional, but nuances allowed the war in the East to continue. Soviets rejected it, claiming German forces weren't required to disarm fully. Demanding a second surrender, they met Allied silence. Germany entered a legal limbo, at peace in the West, but fighting Soviets. Churchill, fearing Soviet dominance, planned Operation Unthinkable, a preemptive strike against the Soviets with Germany as an ally. The Second World War morphed into a third, leaving Germany polarized under a national conservative coalition and constitutional monarchy. Rapid changes and ongoing war left the nation unstable and destitute, clinging to hopes of a brighter future.